Eric Hamelback, good morning.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm ridiculous. I don't know.
I'm still trying to get over that picture of you shooting a BB gun in my head.
Right? With the feet, you turn your feet out and flat to the ground, right?
That's right.
See, I know all the catchrises. I know all the. That's me in a nutshell. I know a little bit about all these ridiculous things, and it's just enough to qualify for being a talk show host.
That's right. You do a great job.
Plus, I've lived in all these crazy places, and so I was born. I was born for this. I always felt that way.
The most interesting man in the world, Steve Byk.
Too funny.
Yep,
well, I'm glad we're in a frivolous mood because it'll lighten the conversation. Eric, you guys are coming under tremendous critique because I think collectively the industry, we all would like to have the uniformity that is at the heart of these initiatives and so forth. I'll reserve a portion of that conversation for the back half of this discussion. For now, let's follow up on Alan's legalese yesterday, explaining where things are. From your discussion with counsel, what did Tuesday's Fifth Circuit rebuffing essentially mean, and where are we from your vantage point at National HBPA?
Sure. Well, a simple statement, Steve, would just say that we are in a place that we were when the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issued HISA unconstitutional. We are still there. The reason that I say that would simply be because the motions that were filed after the first of the year with the amendment from the senator from Kentucky, that was denied, right? It was essentially, there was a request for the court, the Fifth Circuit Appellate Court, to revisit their ruling, or their order, I should say, their opinion, and they denied it. They not only denied it, they also said if you come back again, you're going to get the same 3-panel judges. So it's unconstitutional. Again, the labeling, as you mentioned, that we're getting, I'm fine with that. But at the end of the day, anybody who shouts at me on Twitter about what do we want, I'm just going to quietly continue to preach. We want something that's legal. We want uniformity. We want the same thing that many of the folks on the HISA side want, many of the proponents that want uniformity. I agree with Alan Foreman that we didn't want them, let's call them HISA now, the corporation, to blow up the rules that we had. But that's a side discussion, right? Everybody wants to commingle these discussions about the problems with the regulations, the problems with the new rules. That's a side discussion. Is the act constitutional? That's the groundwork that we've got to start with. We can't be operating on something that is illegal. Again, you and I have discussed the article that said, the writer said, ask any horseman if he even knows what unconstitutional means. Again, what a slap in the face. But at the end of the day, unconstitutional, constitutional is illegal or legal. And so the groundwork is there to make sure we are doing something that is legal. Again, we as in the National HBPA and affiliates, have all been very helpful, you might say, in trying to help the rules and the regulations that we feel as if were hastily done, not done by experts in the space, but we're trying to make them better. Many of the affiliates are. I would say there are many stewards and racing commissioners that are trying to do something about the regulations and the rules that are been put upon us. But the core discussion, Steve, that some people continue to miss is we did this doing due diligence to make sure what was being done was constitutional, therefore wouldn't be challenged in court by a bad actor, by somebody who was caught doing something that 99.9% of the industry don't do. So that to me is still the core, and I think it gets overlooked. The other thing that gets overlooked is there are 4 cases, right? There's currently 4 lawsuits going on right now against different constitutional aspects of HISA. And one of the aspects I think that gets a little bit confused, and I've tried to at least lay it out as case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4. That's nobody's label but Eric, just so everybody knows. And I've only done that simply because of when they were filed. So case 1 and case 3 and even case 4 are all in the Fifth Circuit. Case 1 is the case that we're talking about currently, that the appellate court in the Fifth Circuit issued that mandate, that order, that they weren't going to revisit the case. But they also did it in case 3. There wasn't any press on that, but case 3, which was or is the case that basically allows the states of Louisiana and West Virginia to be enjoined, so they're not operating at all under HISA. That case had the very same order issued earlier this week as did case 1. Case 2 is what I call the states' rights case. That case is the one that's in the 6th district, and currently the appellate court is very close, from what I understand, to issuing an opinion on that. Case 4 is the case out in Texas that's still in the lower courts. So that's kind of a rundown, but I think it's important for people to realize that there are different cases going on, and all of them touch on different aspects of unconstitutionality within HISA. Again, this is not arguing bad rules when we're in court. This is arguing whether the act itself is legal or not. When in fact we were told how many times, Steve, where we issued these press releases and statements about, this was vetted so many times and it was built on the ground of constitutionality. Well, the minute that amendment went into the omnibus package, Senator McConnell told the entire world that bill was not constitutional. After being shoved down our throat that it was, we proved, and right now it's still proven, that bill's unconstitutional. Now, you can pick an aspect, right? Anybody out there can pick a different aspect, all the fancy words, anti-commandeering, non-delegation doctrine, states' rights, Amendment 7, all these amendments, all these constitutional aspects have a different variation of what is being challenged about the act. But nobody disputes we want to get to uniformity. But I will dispute the fact that I'm trying to get there the right way, the proper way, and most importantly, the legal way.
Take a second, Eric, because we haven't reminded in recent, as this has winded its way, into and out of these appellate courts. Mm-hmm. And this is what I was referring to at the opening of the conversation. Explain why it's important, and that HBPA, in representing trainers and owners, are defending this point and trying to focus and elaborate on this point to protect the legal interests of said horsemen and owners long term. because that's the part of this that, instead of just being labeled and painted obstructionist and status quo lovers and serial cheaters, that none of that applies. It's very simply a question of maintaining a position of legal fairness and the opportunity for horsemen that might get caught in a situation that is not nefarious, is innocent, but could be adjudicated as if it was nefarious.
Absolutely, and in all honesty, Steve, I think you answered the question within your question. I mean, it really is about protecting the rights of horsemen as we know it. I think that it's pretty widely felt that there are frustrations. Let's pick on the adjudication system as we have it now with the commissions. I think there's a lot of frustration that gets vocalized about, how long does it take to do, or how long does it take to adjudicate a positive, right? But that's the legal system. I mean, we're seeing it now in the court systems, and it isn't actually just specific to our industry. I have two good friends that are family court judges in Bourbon County, right? And they have a docket that's, a year behind. So that part of it, again, we'd love to have an answer for fixing that, so to speak. But the core of your question really is about defending the legal interest of the owners and trainers that are out there. And I'm not going to just label an HBPA member. At the end of the day, I mean, that is all horsemen, owners, trainers, we need to protect. We need to have somebody looking out for the best interest of the industry. And we feel as if we're doing that by making sure what was pushed through is going to work properly, right? It's maintaining this position of legal fairness, to plagiarize what you just said. That's what it's going to take from what we are doing, is making sure that we are maintaining that legal fairness. Because, again, another aspect, as you brought up, bringing up adjudications for minor overages of therapeutic medication. I've seen some quotes from the HISA Corporation that would make you think that is definitely going to be going forward under HISA. Now, that's not what most people interpret from the ADMC rules that were put in. But again, we are trying to, take one more step back. Let's make sure the act is right before we start bickering too much over the rules, because at this point, I'm trying to focus on the ground, not what is essentially ahead of us, and that's the rules. We've got to make sure the act in and of itself is legal, because again, and I know I've told you this story maybe offline and online, one of the first things that I did when this was going through the process of whether we push or pull the trigger to do that was I talked to a very powerful attorney who told me that would be one of the first things they would do if they were defending somebody, is attack the constitutionality of the bill, to quote unquote maneuver around the charge, the alleged charge that said person would have been in. So again, that's the fairness that we're trying to achieve with what we're doing. And again, the labeling is what it is. I see the officials after the Kansas City Bengals game get attacked. It's going to happen to everybody. So at the end of the day, I'm fine with getting the arrows, but at the end of the day, I hope people understand that what we are doing truly is in the belief of National HBPA, horsemen helping horsemen.
Is it fair? And actually, this is probably a question that I should have directed to Alan yesterday. And I think we've addressed it, or it's come up in the course of these conversations. Maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a simplification. The perception is that horsemen to lose due process, right? I mean, is it a simplification to put it that way?
Certainly a legal question for the attorneys, but yes, I think that there are several attorneys that at least are ones that I speak to regularly that feel as if due process is another aspect of the act that isn't done properly, or certainly isn't constitutional in the way that it's drafted, and they have concerns of that. But that's a space, Steve, that I wouldn't want to start trying to, give you bullet points of what's wrong. That's a true legal ease question for either Peter or Alan or Peter Sarkopoulos, some of those guys that are experts in that space. But yes, I know, put it this way, I do understand from my friend Pete Sarkopoulos in Indiana, prominent equine attorney. He has always been very concerned about the due process issues, as he would say, that are brought up in the act that need to be addressed in a different fashion, or again, brought back into the legalese of how it should be done.
The rest of this will obviously play out. I just want to spend a couple of minutes, and I don't know. I know yesterday morning you had a busy morning. Things were flying, but don't know how much of the conversation you heard between Alan and myself. But one thing I brought up near the end, similar to this approach, I don't even want to say anecdotally, just in passing, in conversation with Mark Cassey, with Dale Romans, and others here, this past week plus at Gulfstream, there does seem to be a warming from horsemen, no matter where they were on the spectrum in terms of resistance or encouragement of HISA. There does seem to be a recognition that the authority is doing everything it can to win, now at this point, to win over the horsemen who had been, uncertain about the viability of it or the execution of it. And some more, open invitations and urging of finding common ground, because if this continues to wind through the courts the way it seems to be, I'll go back to what I said in December, which is we would all do well to find common ground. And I'm just curious if from, again, I've asked you this question repeatedly over the last 6 to 8 months. Have there been any, I don't even want to call them olive branches, but have there been any forays toward, finding some common discussion points?
A couple things there, Steve. First off, I would say, and again, it's a semantics thing for me, but you know me for a long time. The words are very important. I don't think the authority is doing everything they can. Okay, so let's set them aside, right? Miss Lazarus, certainly Mark Guilfoyle, Ann McGovern. I don't know all the staff per se, but yes, I think that there is an effort to correct what was blatantly done wrong, right? Again, Miss Lazarus was hired, a month before the original safety regulations were put in, and then rubber stamped during our conference, I believe. that went into effect. Certainly, she didn't have a hand in writing any of them, and I don't know of all the staff members that were on board at the time. Dr. Jennifer Dernberger. Okay, there's a prime example of, and at least what I've even said publicly, that's the kind of person that the authority, okay, should have hired in January of 2021. That's the difference for me is, this olive branch that, maybe you can say it's out there, but it's not an olive branch. They're in triage mode, Steve. They've put a bunch of rules out there that don't make sense. There are some that are good. Absolutely, there are some that are good. There are some that are good that have never been enforced. That's another issue. But, it's less of an olive branch and them understanding they're bleeding out. It's a triage mode. But there are very good people underneath that HISA umbrella that are trying to get things done right, whether they were involved in the beginning or not. They realize the rollout was botched. It was horrible. And they can't even still get the technological aspects all correct. Everybody's going to have problems, but, we have HBPA affiliates that basically, I laughed with a friend of mine, Ron Moquette. I laughed with Ron. We've basically got HISA employees that are now HBPA admins because they come in, and I say employees tongue in cheek. They're not getting compensated, but you have a lot of people that come into the racetrack offices and the HBPA offices, and they need help because they can't figure things out themselves. And so, we are still trying to comply and work with it. But again, the other point, kind of setting aside the authority versus the HISA staff, again, we're talking about fixing the rules. As I said earlier, nobody's fixing the act. Nobody's fixing the big picture, right? Which is funding, lack of transparency. Those are the aspects that are, currently still very much problematic. The rules, the regulations, if they're willing to make changes and they're willing to hear people, the Horsemen's Advisory Group, Dr. Doug Daniels, while he sits on that position as an owner breeder veterinarian, he's currently the National HBPA president, chairman of the board. And he was invited to sit on this position. Ron Moquette is an Arkansas HBPA board member. Don Von Himmel is a former Oklahoma Treo HBPA board member. So there are aspects that one might say or see an olive branch being reached out. I don't see it as an olive branch as much as an oh shit moment. We've got some problems here, and we need people that are experts in the space. Again, all of which should have been done, in January of 2021. That's my opinion, but me, I'm pretty founded in my opinions.
Well, the being resolute and steadfast in this is, it's an imperative, essentially, and but also at the same time being willing to work because we have to. I mean that because we do all want the same thing long term. That's at the heart of this. So,
I look every day at a book as a reference that was written in 2012, so long before I was here at National HBPA, still, in my tenure with Adena Springs. But there's a book written by Dr. Tom Tobin and one of my mentors, Kent Sterling. The book was basically to address therapeutic and prohibited substances and giving the scientific basis for thresholds and withdrawal times. And that book was done and published through the National HBPA in 2012, trying to essentially work with the RMTC and get this done right. So nobody can say that we've not been pushing towards uniformity for, again, much longer than I've been here. That has been a goal. It's been part of the mission statement, again, before I arrived. So that, as you say, is something we all want. We all need as an industry. But you can't build it on sand. It's got to be on stone. It's got to be unbreakable. And what we know now, they built it on a very shaky, breakable house of cards.
Yeah, and that was the attempts were made to point that out, and
yes.
But it all comes back to the 2 a.m. in the morning, backroom machinations that initiated this entire scenario. So.
And as we've talked about before, my least favorite topic to talk about, get rid of LASIX. For whatever reason, that has still been, I think, everybody wants to point at, the HBPA, the only thing they want to talk about is LASIX. So that's BS. We want to talk about science and why you think LASIX is bad, because the science doesn't say that. But it's not about LASIX. It comes back to equine health and welfare. You ask racetrack practitioners, you ask the Dr. Copelands of the world, who I eat lunch with in Bourbon County at Lil's, he will tell you getting rid of LASIX will hurt. So, again, it's not about LASIX. It's about equine health and welfare. So, again, that's one of the impetuses of driving this thing down, Capitol Mall to get it passed. That's another point that you have always stressed. You have, in all honesty, been one of the loudest proponents for the ridiculousness of that aspect of getting a quote unquote federal bill.
Well, the effort here to do the one focused thing that the group behind this initiative. That was their North Star, and
right.
Doesn't matter how many babies they drown on the way to it.
Right.
So
we still can't even get a true number of the horses that bled in the Breeders' Cup. I mean, that's how ridiculous it is. And so again, I don't understand it, but it is not the first thing that the HBPA, air quotes, wants to talk about. That's just a complete misnomer. So
amongst many,
amongst many, that's right. All
right. Well, we will power through this, and this is we'll at some point everything will intersect in a way that provides a path forward, and that's all.
That's correct.
And
that's correct.
What we want. Eric Hamelback, National HBPA.